spring games happening all over the SEC. Eventually we'll have spring games all over the country. They just start spring practice a little bit earlier in the South. And I was checking out the feedback at Tennessee, and I know a lot of people may be focused on the quarterback battle there. I am too. But the quarterback battle's not settled. I haven't figured out much of anything about that quarterback battle. Faison Brandon, George McIntyre, it kind of depends which day it is as to which guy you hear the better feedback about. And that's not the only place where it's like that right now. But you know what theme continues to come out of Tennessee? A theme that came out of the orange and white game yesterday is the same theme that we've heard all spring. And that is defense is kind of carrying the story right now. Defense is the story over there right now. Jim Knowles, who was at Ohio State 2 years ago, won a national title, was at Penn State last year. Everything blows up. He comes to Tennessee, brings several people with him, some of them players, some of them staffers, brings folks down there with him. And the book on Jim Knowles is, man, that defense is really complex. It normally takes a long while to learn it. But because he brought in so many pieces that he could plug, I'm not saying it's a finished product, but Josh Heupel's own words yesterday actually were probably much further along than fans or media, maybe even we even thought that we would be. I added in the last part. He didn't say we, yeah. But that's the story there right now. Now that's interesting because when you think about the identity of any given Tennessee team under Josh Heupel, I think the more lazy approach would be, oh, well, they got to win offensively. They just got to win offensively. They didn't 2 years ago. 2 years ago, they went to the playoff. And there were several stretches of drought offensively throughout games and throughout that season. Defense carried them. Tim Banks' defense carried them. That fell off a cliff last year, and that's why they didn't make the playoff last year. But 2 years ago, that was the way it is, or way it was. I think that'll be the way it is this year. But it puts them in a very interesting spot also because if you were to listen to people in the Tennessee world after the spring game, especially folks who were there watching it, they were like, man, I really don't know about the upside of this team. Ooh, I don't know, man. Our ceiling may be lower than we thought or we hoped it would be. Now, that doesn't impact what they're actually capable of. But when you get expectations going the opposite way than expectations normally go in spring, sets up an interesting dynamic because all of a sudden, if people are thinking, boy, 9 wins would be a really, really good year this year, you got an opportunity to really surprise some people. As opposed to Texas, let's say, where anything less than a national championship is going to be viewed as a failure. So my feel is this team's going to be defensive-oriented, especially early on, lean on Deshaun Bishop. I mean, ground game, good defense, that's their blueprint early. It may be their season-long blueprint, but that's especially what it's got to be early on. Alabama had A-Day yesterday. I went and watched Alabama in their scrimmage last week, and then they had their A-Day scrimmage yesterday. And depending on which one you watched, you have very different feelings about the quarterback battle. So when I went and watched them, Austin Mack probably had the better day out of he and Keelan Russell. Russell made some good plays, but I came back and I said, hey, there doesn't look to be a whole lot of separation one way or the other, at least based on what I saw yesterday. But then my feel throughout Alabama spring practice had been eventually Keelan Russell's going to win the job. So Keelan Russell was head and shoulders the better quarterback in the A-Day game yesterday. Kalen DeBoer made sure to mention afterwards what they had sort of kept under wraps last week, and that is Austin Mack was dealing with some injury stuff. So I don't think you got him at 100%, but people saw Keelan Russell's best. Well, they saw him at probably the best he's been all spring, and my stance has been and continues to be his best is better than anyone on that team. Keelan Russell's best matches up with anyone in the country. The difference is Keelan Russell has no experience. And so when you're talking about processing, when you're talking about how fast the game moves, these are the sorts of things that he's got to have come to him. The difference to remember here is this is not a true freshman. He was there last year. So this is not a kid fresh out of high school that you're trying to throw into the SEC. Limited experience, but not a true freshman. A name I'm going to repeat because it's a name that popped a little bit yesterday is Trayshawn Brooks. So I'll tell you now, since people saw him yesterday, when I walked in the building a couple of weeks ago, I had 3 different staffers come up to me individually and mention one name. They weren't standing with each other. They independently mentioned one name. And it wasn't a quarterback, and it wasn't Ryan Williams. It was Trayshawn Brooks. Trayshawn Brooks was a running back out of East Texas. I think he was committed to Boise. and he was a very late take for Alabama. Sometimes it just works this way. And a guy's appreciative for an opportunity. Maybe a guy was still a little bit of a hidden gem in the recruiting cycle. Believe it or not, that still happens. Hey, do me one favor right here. Look down. Are you subscribed to the channel? If you are, thank you. If you're not, please click subscribe. It helps us keep the show free and free of corporate interference. All right, that's it for me. Back to the clip. He's going to be hard to keep off the field as a true freshman. And that's not even to mention the five-star true freshman running back that they also signed, Crowell, who's been hurt all spring, thus giving an opportunity to other guys. So their run game, look, still very much a work in progress. The offensive line there, 4 or 5 starters new, still very much a work in progress. It can't be worse than it was last year, but I think just overall, the amount of skill they have in the running back room, there's no Heisman contender in there or anything like that, but they've got a solid stable of tailbacks there. I know Kevin Riley didn't do much yesterday, but I think he's a pretty good player too. That, along with the reemergence of the whole element of RPO in that offense, especially if Keelan Russell ends up being the guy, will be a really big deal. Now, what I didn't like was Noah Rogers got hurt, and they carted him off, and I don't really know. I think they MRI'd him today, and so we're waiting to hear back there. He's a really good player for them and is going to be counted on at wide receiver, but it's not like a one-man room. You got Ryan Williams there, obviously, but Ced Morgan, who's a true freshman, will play as a true freshman a lot, and Derek Meadows had a really good day for him yesterday. So the other thing that people are starting to see that I talked about when I came back from watching them last week was how big they are defensively, how long they are defensively, and really as a team, just like a big team. Not sacrificing a whole lot of speed. I'm not saying they're lethargic. They're just really big. They're a whole lot bigger defensively, especially up front than they were last year. So Alabama, shockingly, a work in progress with pretty good upside. So we'll see. Florida. Had spring game at Florida. Now, when I was down there a couple of weeks ago, we watched him practice, and I thought pretty definitively Aaron Philo had the better day at quarterback. Tramel Jones, yesterday, had the better day at quarterback. This is the way these quarterback battles happen a lot, by the way. If you've ever wondered how in the history of college football, there's a quarterback battle, and then the staff names a starter, then that starter goes down, and somehow, some way, the backup ends up playing, and he plays better than the starter. And you look and you say, how could these coaches have gotten it wrong? How could they have made the wrong decision? It's because the decisions in some of these quarterback battles are rarely 90-10 or like 95-5 or even 80-20. Sometimes it's like this. Sometimes it's like 6 out of 10 days, one guy has the better practice. 4 out of 10 days, it seems like the other guy did. This is still a gray area, but there eventually comes a point on the calendar where you got to name a starter. And I'm not even saying that's necessarily the case here, but just the illustration of what I saw in the practice I went to versus what you saw yesterday if you watched this thing. It really goes to show you that these quarterback decisions are not always the slam dunk that the public envisions it being. Like you think, oh, it's a quarterback battle in spring, but it'll work itself out. Hey, sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't, and you just got to make a call on the guy who's going to go out there and start week 1. Last year, Lane Kiffin, whose evaluation of the quarterback position I trust pretty readily, he thought Austin Simmons gave him the best chance to win. And then Trinidad Chambliss finds his way on the field. And Trinidad Chambliss ends up having Ole Miss knocking on the door of the national championship game. Was Lane Kiffin an idiot? Or are these things very fluid? I think it probably is the latter. KJ Ford looks like he's going to be a factor for them at the edge position. And also Micah Mays had a really big day at wide receiver, and that's a big deal because it's another pancake on the stack, as Meemaw would say. Because this is a room where we got Eric Singleton in there. We got Vernell Brown. We got Dallas Wilson. There is no shortage there. I called it the most underrated receiver room in the country coming into spring. But I don't know, Jesse. I'm hearing a lot of people talk about Florida's receiver room, so I don't know that it's underrated anymore. I just think that it's good. So we got 3 programs here that we just talked about that entered spring with quarterback competitions on their hands. and none of these have been sorted out yet. I would say, man, if I had to handicap these, Keelan Russell at Alabama, maybe I feel has the best odds to win these battles respectively. I'm still going to stick with George McIntyre at Tennessee. I'm still sticking with Aaron Philo at Florida. And I just wrote all that in pencil because I want to be able to erase it pretty quickly.